300 years, the most powerful nations on earth grew richer and stronger on the profits of the slave trade. Over 12 million men, women and children were forcibly transported from Africa on slave ships like this to the colonies and plantations in North and South America. Today, slavery is illegal in every country on the planet. But the truth is, slavery did not die in the 19th century. It is alive, it is thriving, and it is bigger than ever. This series investigates the very modern evil of 21st century slavery. From the smallest villages in Asia to some of the most economically vibrant cities in the West. But it begins in the last place you'd expect to find slaves. A country which only a few generations ago tore itself apart to outlaw slavery. A country still racked by collective guilt over its role in the transatlantic trade.
The United States probably has between 40 and 50,000 slaves, measured conservatively. But I think also, to be fair, the United States is one of the governments that has been most honest about the extent, the amount, and precise crime of enslavement within the United States.
150 years ago, if you walked around the heart of the US Capitol, you could have bought a slave off a street corner. And this country had to go through a painful civil war in order to bring slavery to an end. And in the 21st century, there's no doubt that the United States is leading the way in the fight against modern slavery. And as testament to that, this country is planning to prosecute the largest ever case against modern slavery. Waikiki, Honolulu, America's playground and a name synonymous with glamour and carefree vacations. But behind the glamour, a secret hidden in plain sight. Slaves toiling in Hawaii's fertile soil to produce the food the rest of the world puts on its tables.
There is a strong possibility that the very fruit, the very vegetable, the very egg that you're eating could have been brought to your table by an enslaved individual right here in the land of the free.
แล้วก็ตอนกลางคืนก็ต้องมียามคุมตลอด 24 ชั่วโมงไปไหนก็ไม่ได้เลยที่สุดก็คือเขาจะจิกหัวใช้คือไม่ต้องทานข้าวต้องไม่ทานข้าวคือสั่งไม่ให้ทานก็คือไม่ทานสั่งให้ทำถึงแม้ป่วยอยู่เจ็บอยู่ก็ต้องไปทำว่าผมจะมาสร้างอนาคตให้กับครอบครัวของผมอยู่ดีกินดีแต่ผมต้องกลับมาอยู่ในความลำบากที่ไม่มีความเป็นธรรมให้กับผมเลย
In the remote northern provinces of Thailand, life has continued unchanged for centuries. Close-knit families eke out a subsistence living by working ancestral lands and rice fields. And it was here, in 2003, that agents for an American farm worker recruitment company came calling.
ครับเพราะตอนนั้นที่บ้านประสบปัญหานะครับความยากจนทั้งเป็นหนี้ธกส.เยอะมีนายหน้าไปที่หมู่บ้านแล้วก็พอเขาเรียกมาชุมนุมกันแล้วก็พูดให้ฟังว่าไม่มาอเมริกาแล้วว่าจะได้เงินแค่นั้นแค่นี้
Families in Lampang earn less than $1,000 a year. The recruiters told them that in America they would earn $50,000 in 3 years. There was just one catch. They had to pay illegally high registration fees to the recruiters, up front and in cash.
The recruitment fees were high. They were generally between 500 and 750,000 Thai baht, or between 15 and 20,000 US dollars. But for 3 years of, they believed, guaranteed work, and the contract did say 3 years employment, at a rate of $8 or $9 an hour. So when the guys did the math, they figured that they could pay off their debt in the first year, and then the second and third years would basically be profit for their families.
แพงนะครับ20,000เนี่ย20,000นี่คือบางครับก็พูดตรงนี้คือทั้งชีวิตก็คือไม่มีที่เมืองไทยนะครับแต่ต้องจำเป็นเพราะว่าต้องการที่มาสร้างอนาคตให้กับครอบครัวต้องไปกู้จากแบงก์มาทั้งหมดนี่คือ800,000
That decision, which would be made by more than 1,000 men like Arshun and Desha in this impoverished corner of Thailand, was the start of a journey that began with the dream of a future, but would end in slavery.
ตรงนี้นะคือหวังมากนะครับคือตั้งเป้าไว้สูงมากนะครับคือฝากชีวิตทุกคนนะครับที่บ้านทั้งญาติทั้งคือผมต้องดูแลแม่อีกเพราะว่าพ่อเสียตั้งนานแล้วคือฝากความหวังไว้เต็มที่เลยครับคือเป็นทางเลือกสุดท้ายแล้วนะครับ
This is where 44 of those men were sent, Alun Farms on Honolulu, a key supplier of fruits and vegetables to major world food brands. But very quickly, Alun's new Thai recruits found the dream they had been sold turned into a nightmare.
The problems really started early on for the guys. Their passports were taken shortly upon arrival. They did not have enough food. Many times they were given moldy bread, if anything at all, and coffee. And oftentimes they didn't have, probably most mornings, they didn't have enough to eat before going out and starting their toiling in the very hot sun on the Eva Plains, which is where Alun Farms is located.
But there was worse to come.
เขาบอกว่าเขาต้องหักค่ากับข้าวค่าทุกอย่างคือในสัญญานี่ไม่หักนะครับ 9.42 เนี่ยคือไม่หักแต่พอมาถึงแล้วเขาบอกว่าราคานั้นมันไม่ได้แล้วนะสถานการณ์เริ่มจะแย่ลงทุกวันตั้งแต่ราคาเขามาให้เขามาหาค่ากับข้าวแล้วมาลำบากหนักตอนที่เป็นนอนอยู่ตู้คอนเทนเนอร์ครับเพราะว่าน้ำอะไรก็ไม่มีน้ำเย็นแล้วก็มีแต่กลางมุ้งยุงก็เยอะอะไรทำนองนี้ครับก็นอนแออัดกัน20 กว่าคนในตู้คอนเทนเนอร์เดียว
And then the promised pay started to dry up.
They weren't given the amount of work, the amount of hours per week that was promised. And they very quickly started to see, again, calculating the math in their heads, that they weren't going to be able to pay the interest on the debt, much less to start paying down the debt.
Without money and isolated on Alun Farm's remote fields, the Thai workers found themselves trapped.
หนี้สินนี่ถ้าเดินไปที่อื่นนี่หนี้สินก็มีแต่จะเป็นภาระหนักขึ้นไปเพราะว่าสถานการณ์ทางบ้านนี่คือฝากไว้กับพวกผมทุกคนเลยนะครับเพราะว่าตอนนั้นมันใจหนึ่งมันอยากกลับบ้านมันเจอสภาพอย่างนี้มันก็อยากกลับบ้านแต่มันกลับไม่ได้เพราะว่าหนี้สินก็เยอะแล้วตอนนั้นค่าแรงน้อยแล้วเงินที่กู้มานั้นมันเยอะผมก็ได้แต่ตัดดอกเขา
In December 2009, the owners of Alun Farms, brothers Mike and Alex Su, pled guilty to charges of conspiring to hold the Thai men in conditions of forced labor. The Sus admitted knowing about the illegal recruitment fees, confiscating the workers' passports, and threatening them with financial ruin if they tried to escape. What makes this case one of modern slavery?
Forced labor. They were constantly being told that if they complained, if they didn't work extra hard, they were going to be sent home. And it was the fear of being sent home and the fear of losing everything for their family that kept them in that condition. And I think, there are different ways of chaining and imprisoning someone. Old-time slavery was, I think, much more fear of physical abuse and harm and even death. Here the threat wasn't so much physical. The fear for the victims was complete destitution and loss for their family. Again, they would lose everything, and that kept them in that condition.
The Sioux also agreed to pay each of their victims $8,000 compensation, enough to enable them to go home to Thailand. But what happened next would dash even that dream. On Honolulu, many of those victims had waited years to see the case come to court. But this summer, and despite the Sioux brothers' previous guilty pleas, the Alun prosecution was dismissed on a legal technicality. It left the Thai workers without their promised money and completely devastated.
คำว่าทาสนะครับคือมันก็เหมือนกับคนคือพูดคือต่ำที่สุดก็คือเขาจะจิกหัวใช้คือไม่ต้องทานข้าวต้องไม่ทานข้าวคือสั่งไม่ให้ทานก็คือไม่ทานสั่งให้ทำถึงแม้ป่วยอยู่เจ็บอยู่ก็ต้องไปทำถ้าไปทำควรต้องถูกลงโทษอย่างลักษณะแต่ก่อนเมืองไทยเนี่ยต้องทับเล็บทับนิ้วมือหรือว่าใช้เหล็กบีบขมับใช่ไหมครับตอนนี้มันก็ไม่แตกต่างคือมันทาสทางจิตใจมากกว่านะครับมันเจ็บยิ่งกว่าทับตรงนั้นอีก
Alun Farms wasn't the only business importing impoverished Thai men. At the same time, Global Horizons Incorporated, a multi-million-dollar recruitment agency in Los Angeles, was operating an identical scheme, but on a much larger scale.
Global Horizon essentially applied for visas for over 1,000 Thai farm workers to be brought into this country, and they were placed on farms throughout the United States, on the mainland and off the mainland, and they were growing and harvesting all kinds of produce. They were on pig farms, they were on egg farms, they were on chicken farms, you name it.
Global targeted the same impoverished villages in Thailand as Alun Farms. And its recruiters charged the same illegally high registration fees.
There's a set cap on how much you're supposed to pay for work abroad. So in this case, for farm work in the US, the worker should not be paying more than 60,000 baht. That is in Thai currency. But in fact, what ended up happening, the workers were told that they had to pay 900,000 baht. And they ended up having to mortgage their lands and their homes, and had to take money from loan sharks, borrow money, get into massive exorbitant debt, and pay high interest.
Thanet signed up with Global Horizons in 2004.
ช่วงที่ผมกู้เงินเพราะว่าความหวังที่อยากให้อนาคตและครอบครัวของผมที่อยู่เมืองไทยจะได้อยู่ดีกินดีมากขึ้นเพราะว่าเห็นอัตราเงินเดือนมันสูงถึง 70,000 บาทซึ่งผมอาชีพทำไร่ทำนาไม่มีรายได้ที่จะสูงขนาดนั้นมันเป็นโอกาสที่ว่าผมต้องมาขุดทองที่ประเทศอเมริกา
Thanet mortgaged his home, his fields, and his father's land to pay the recruiters' fees. But the American dream turned sour very quickly.
ผมมาครั้งแรกผมนายจ้างทางบริษัท Global ให้ผมไปลงที่ฮาวายโดยการที่ว่าไปทำงานเกษตรก็ได้ทำวันหนึ่งก็ตั้งแต่ 6 โมงเช้าถึง 5 โมงเย็นไม่ไปไหนไม่ได้ออกจากที่ทำงานก็กลับเข้าบ้านพัก แล้วก็ไม่มีการให้ใช้โทรศัพท์ติดต่อกับทางบ้านในการที่บ้านอยู่ด้วยกันรวมทั้งหมด22คนมี1ห้องน้ำแล้วห้องนอนจะนอนรวมเป็นชั้นจะไม่มีไฟฟ้าให้ใช้ไม่มีไฟฟ้าแล้วเขาจะไม่มีโทรศัพท์ให้ใช้ไม่มีทีวีให้ใช้คือข้ามมาก็แค่มีโคมไฟเล็กๆให้เราอยู่ตอนตี 5ทาง Global จะมารับออกไปทำงาน
This is the man who owned and operated Global Horizons Incorporated, an Israeli businessman called Mordechai Moti Orion. Mr. Orion's extensive business dealings in the United States brought him wealth and a home in the hills above Los Angeles. But both Mr. Orion and Global have a long and checkered history.
There are many actions filed against Mr. Orion now. U.S. Federal Department of Labor charges against him for back wages and penalties. And then there are liens on his properties by the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service of the federal government, because of unpaid taxes. There's also immigration violations.
In 2007, individual Thai workers began arriving at the Thai Community Development Center in Los Angeles. Each told a story of having to escape from what they called slavery.
They came as far up north as Pacific Northwest, state of Washington, Oregon, and then Nevada, and the desert states, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and going south, Texas, Louisiana, Florida. These are all the states where they escaped from, all the farms they were on. South Carolina,
all the way up
Virginia,
the East Coast.
all the way up to East Coast, and then of course Hawaii, all the different islands of Hawaii.
But it covers the entire country where the farms were
Absolutely.
and where the former slaves were able to sort of run away from.
That's right.
Thanet was one of those who escaped.
วันแรกที่ผมได้หนีออกจากของบริษัท Global เป็นวันที่ว่านายมัตตี้ซึ่งเป็นนายจ้างให้พนักงานทุกคนไปช่วยเทถนนคอนกรีตเข้าหน้าบ้านของเขาแล้ววันนั้นน่ะซึ่งผมแอบเห็นว่าเขาซ่อนพาสปอร์ตของผมไว้ที่โต๊ะทำงานลิ้นชักโต๊ะทำงานของเขาผมก็เลยแกล้งบอกว่าผมปวดท้องมากผมก็เลยแอบเอาขโมยเอาพาสปอร์ตของผมเพื่อต้องการที่จะหนีออกจากบริษัท Global.
But escaping from slavery has not made him free.
ตอนนี้ตั้งแต่วันที่ผมออกจากบริษัท Global มาได้เนี่ยผมไม่มีวีซ่าหรือไม่มีเอกสารใดๆที่ถูกต้องตามกฎหมายแต่ผมต้องหลบๆซ่อนๆทำงานตามร้านอาหารใช่ครับที่ผมต้องทนอยู่ทุกวันนี้เพราะว่าต้องการเงินไปไถ่ที่นากับที่บ้านเพื่อให้ภรรยาของผมกับลูกพ่อแม่จะได้อยู่โดยที่ไม่ต้องไปเช่าเขาอยู่ทุกวันนี้ผมต้องจ่ายหนี้สินอยู่ตลอดเพราะผมกู้เงินมาทั้งหมด 600,000 บาทเพื่อมาจ่ายให้บริษัท Global ตอนนี้หนี้สินผมยังไม่หมดเพราะผมจ่ายทั้งดอก100 บาทผมจ่าย5%.
In September 2010, the FBI and Justice Department charged Mordechai Orion and his key lieutenants in Global Horizons with multiple counts of human trafficking. The indictment alleges that Global Horizons knew about the illegal recruitment fees and took a cut of them, held hundreds of Thai workers as forced labor on farms across the United States, confiscated their passports, and deployed armed guards to prevent them from leaving.
This is by far the most significant case in U.S. history of anti-human trafficking and anti-modern-day slavery because it will now become the largest case of human trafficking in U.S. history because of the sheer number of victims involved.
Mr. Orion's trial is not due to start until February 2012. But after months of negotiation, he agreed to meet us in a California hotel room. He now claims he is the victim of a plot by the Justice Department to cover up flaws in the regulations covering migrant workers coming to America.
So now there is a problem. Let's take this guy, this little Jew, Israeli, whatever he come from. Let's blame him for everything that we hate and make it the biggest human trafficking in America. But you can say human trafficking about anything, in fact, if that's the philosophy of human trafficking. So everything is human trafficking. Going on airplane from Hawaii to LA is human trafficking. So all the airlines are human trafficking business. Because who traffic my workers from island to island? Hawaiian airline.
With regard to the registration fees, the government alleges that some of these were as high as $21,000.
I think it's totally wrong what you said, because I don't believe that they pay this kind of amount of money. I think it's fiction. If I'm a Thai guy, and just let's go reverse now, and somebody told me that I'm going to have a job in another country, and by the way, this has happened for every country around the world, and I'm really eager to go there, okay? I'll do anything I can to make it happen. And I'll go to extreme because I'm Jewish. The people in the Holocaust done anything they can to save their life. You know how many American people today would be happy to get $10 an hour net in their pocket and have somebody pay for them housing, transportation, take them to work every day? Or I'll take my grandma to shopping once a week. Is that what you call human trafficking?
In February of 2011, one of Mordechai Orion's most senior lieutenants decided to enter into a plea bargain with the US Justice Department and agreed to turn evidence against his former ally. Mr. Bruce Schwartz said that he knowingly conspired to enslave Thai workers with the full knowledge of Mr. Orion and other members of Global Horizons, that together they on purpose withheld the passports of the Thai workers, thus making it impossible for them to escape, and they also knowingly used the huge amount of debts that the Thai workers had entered into as a way of enforcing the Thai workers to remain in Global Horizons employment.
After everything that you have had to face and your co-defendants, you personally, do you have any regrets?
I believe if I was myself, I would not regret on anything. I'll fight it tooth and nail, because I think what I done was a great thing. I changed people's life. I think the pain of what my family went through and my kids, it was a little, if I can call it, a little Holocaust for my family.
In that, if nothing else, Mr. Orion and his alleged victims have something in common.
คนไทยที่มาทำงานเพื่ออนาคตที่ดีเพื่อชีวิตที่ดีผมอยากให้ทางราชการหรือหน่วยงานที่เกี่ยวข้องช่วยดูแลในจุดนี้ด้วยสำหรับคนที่เขาไม่มีโอกาสสำหรับคนที่เขาไม่รู้ภาษาอังกฤษสำหรับคนที่เขาไม่มีปัญญาที่จะเอาตัวเองรอดอย่างน้อยๆขอให้เขาได้ไทยที่นาที่บ้านเอาคืนไม่ได้ต้องการอะไรมากกว่านี้ขอบคุณครับ
Across the United States, many of the victims of Global Horizons are pinning their hopes on the trial of Moti Orion. But the collapse of the Alun Farms prosecution has dented their faith in the US legal system.
Does the American government do enough to end slavery within its borders? Absolutely not. It needs to spend $1 billion a year, perhaps, to really wipe it out. It spends maybe 100 to 150 million, and that barely scratches the surface. And the thing that's heartbreaking about that fact is that the United States could be a slave-free country.
Today, hundreds of the Thai slaves who were victims of Alun Farms and Global Horizons remain trapped in the United States, unable to return home because of their debts and separated from the families whom they had tried to support.
7 ปีแล้วครับตั้งแต่มานี่ยังไม่เคยกลับไป
ตอนแรกก็มีพ่อกับแม่กับแฟนแล้วมาได้3 ปีพ่อก็เสียไม่ต้องคอยว่ามีเรื่องกับใครก็มันจะไม่เอาอะไรมากขอแค่ว่าขอความเป็นธรรมขอสิ่งที่เราเสียไปขอสิ่งที่ครอบครัวผมเสียไป
The In the next episode of Slavery, a 21st century evil, the women trapped in sex slavery, and the men who trafficked them exposed.